What's up, Star Wars nerds, and welcome to another episode of Brett on Fett. On today's episode, we'll have another edition of Droid Service where I'll be reviewing the brand new Professor Huyang figure for the Vintage Collection. Plus, I got a couple of pickups that may be my favorite 3.75 modern astromech figures of all time. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 93 of Brett on Fett, and for this video I will be having another edition of Droid Service, which is my series of videos dedicated entirely to droids and droid figure collecting. And for this video I did recently pick up a couple of loose 3.75 astromechs, and they may be some of my favorite of all time. Now, I picked these up a little while ago before I started collecting all of those Cantina alien figures. And by the way, if you checked out my last video on the unboxing of all of those Cantina figures, thank you so much. That video is doing very well, at least by my small channel standards, and I actually gained a few subscribers after posting that video. So thank you so much if you liked that video and you subscribed. It's much appreciated. I still had 5 or 6 figures that were late to arrive in the mail and didn't get featured in that video. So I may do a quick follow-up, maybe a hyperdrives video where I just show those remaining 5 or 6 figures because they've now finally started trickling in. Before we get into those 2 astromechs I recently picked up, I do want to give my review of the brand new Professor Huyang figure from the Ahsoka series, which came in the latest wave for the Vintage Collection, which recently started hitting shelves here in the US. So let's take a look at Professor Huyang. All right, so here's the latest wave from the Vintage Collection, minus the Mandalorian Minds of Mandalore figure, which for some reason didn't ship yet, even though I ordered all of these at the same time. Not a very exciting wave. We did get that Axe Woves with the corrected swappable helmet, but it is the Season 3 version of Axe Woves on the card back, so that was really frustrating. They should have just reissued him on a Season 2 card back, maybe with an alternate image from the original release. Perhaps a surprise, sneaky good figure from this wave could be this Mandalorian Fleet Commander. Still waiting on a second one to arrive as an opener so I can get a really good look at him. And then we got yet another Grogu, this one being dubbed the Beach Ball Grogu because the image is on a beach and his little pod looks like a beach ball. But we're not here to talk about Beach Ball Grogu and the Mandos. We are here to review Professor Huyang, so let's take a close look at him. Alright, so here is Professor Huyang on card. Obviously this is from the Ahsoka series, this is not the Clone Wars version. And this is a fantastic card back image. I love the image they chose. However, you can see the contrast between the colors of the actual figure and the source material. More on that later. It says VC311, and there's a look at the back of the card in that new style. And overall, I'd say this is a very, very good looking card back. Great image choice. All right, so here is Huyang out of the packaging with all the accessories he comes with, starting with the data pad right there. You've got his little lightsaber repair tool. That kind of looks like a lightsaber hilt, but I think that's a tool. Then he has these 2 different arms that go on his backpack, and unfortunately they are static. There is no moving parts on those arms. All right, so next up, let's take a closer look at the appearance of Professor Huyang. And right off the bat, he does have some nice paint apps here. There's some metallic bronzy paint trim there around his forehead and around his collar area. He's got a glossy, kind of tannish color body, which we'll get into the accuracies of that a little later. He's got a really cool soft goods comma that's very well molded. I like the detailing on it. Taking a look at the midsection, let me get a better look here, get the arms out of the way. But yeah, the midsection's got that plate there, the stomach, but then you can see like the wiring molded, but they did not paint any of it. So that's a little disappointing. The legs look really good. They've got kind of this darker bronzy color to them. Very good molding, very good application of paint apps. Not sure about the accuracy though, so we'll get into that a little later in the video as well. Here's one more closer look at his face. Now his eyes do have kind of a metallic-y look to them, but they're not the yellow you see in the show. And there's a look at his backpack with those molded arms folded up that do not move. Next, we'll go ahead and do a check to make sure he can hold the accessories he comes with, and he does hold them very well. So that's all good there, and he looks good holding those accessories. But let's take a look at that backpack and those arms. So again, you've got the molded closed arms. Unfortunately, they do not articulate and they just pop off here. You can see they've got 2 pegs and some peg holes there. And then you just plug in the outstretched arms on the top peg holes like so. And, you know, at least they molded them a little bit differently. They're kind of at a different angle. At least the, you know, the hand part is at a different angle. And then you just pop the backpack back on like so. So that's kind of unfortunate. It doesn't look terrible, but it's just very unfortunate they didn't go ahead and make those articulated. So there he is with all his accessories plus his extended backpack arms, and he does look really good. Alright, so let's go ahead and run through the articulation. He does have a barbell neck, which is great, so plenty of motion there, although he doesn't tilt forward quite as much as I would have preferred, but it's good enough for a droid. He's got a ball hinge at the shoulder that doesn't get his arms quite all the way up, and he's got a swivel hinge at the elbow, which is great, and then he's got the swivel wrist. And taking a look at the midsection, the crunch is like on a ball. It's got plenty of motion there. And then the waist has a separate swivel as well. So that's awesome. His soft goods comma gets out of the way for those barbell hips. He's got a swivel joint at the upper thigh, a hinge at the knee with a swivel at the upper shin. And then he's got a hinge at the ankle. No rocker ankles, but it is pretty flexible there. And I think that's pretty good enough for a droid. So overall, I'd say the articulation for this figure is very good, especially for a droid. He's going to be able to do anything you need him to do, I think. Next up for comparisons, I want to bring in that Disney Professor Huyang figure. This is the one that came in the Droid Factory set that came out a few months ago. And right off the bat, you notice the big difference is the height. The Disney version looks way shorter. And for scale, let me bring in Sabine Wren. And you can see she's only slightly shorter than the Disney version, but she is a lot shorter than the TVC version. And so I went back and checked the show to see the height difference, and I found an image where she is a lot shorter than Huyang, and so the TVC version is way more to scale than the Disney version. Alright, so let's take Sabine out and let's take a closer look at the differences in the appearances between the two figures. And looking at the dome of his head, the Disney version has a much more metallic blue, and that does seem to be more accurate to the source material. I found a couple images here where you can see it's clearly a more metallic blue, almost a greenish blue. And then there's the body color issue. The Disney version is far more accurate. Huyang is a champagne metal color, and he's actually more silver than gold. And I think if TVC had just done a silver body, that actually would have been closer to accurate. Also, the Disney version actually took the time to paint some of the wiring on the midriff there. So that's really disappointing that TVC did not go ahead and do that. And then next, I noticed that the comma has 2 tones on the Disney version versus the TVC is all brown. So I went and found a picture, and he does in fact have 2 different colors on his comma. So again, the Disney version is more accurate with the paint. Next, I was looking at the legs. The Disney version has the same body color on the legs versus the TVC had that nice bronze. Well, when I looked at the source material, his legs are the same color as the rest of his body. And so, again, Disney more accurate, although I do admit I like the TVC bronze a little better. Let's take a look at the backpacks for the two figures. Very similar, although the Disney one actually painted the bolts there at the hinges, but it is completely static, whereas, of course, the TVC one, you can at least change out the arms. Overall, the Disney one had surprisingly good articulation, but not anywhere near as good as the articulation for the TVC, as well it should be. All in all, I'd say the Disney version of Huyang is better than the TVC version with respect to the accuracy of the color applications. However, the TVC figure is far superior when it comes to the scale and the articulation. And speaking of scale, just for fun, I wanted to bring in the Black Series version of Professor Huyang for comparison. And right off the bat, you can see the Black Series used the same body color for the legs. So at least in that respect, the Black Series is more screen accurate than the TVC version. Now looking on the back at the midriff, you can see the Black Series version did bother to paint the wiring, or at least some of the wiring, compared to TVC that just left it all that one solid black color. And next I want to compare the accessories. There's 2 major differences in the accessories. First off, with the data pads, the TVC version is just blank versus the Black Series is painted. a nice metallic blue, and then it's got some silver there. And this is something common you'd see years ago with TVC versus Black Series, where Black Series would have a lot more paint details. But now, lately, TVC has really caught up to Black Series with that respect, but they really missed the mark in this case. And then similarly, when you look at the backpack on the Black Series version, they have the fully articulated arms, which is great. I love this feature on the Black Series version of Huyang. Whereas the TVC version had those static, replaceable arms. That's just not great. And so this was a really disappointing aspect of the TVC Huyang, in my opinion. We've seen Hasbro articulate smaller parts in the past for TVC, so it must have been a cost savings decision. Anyways, like I've said, TVC has really caught up to Black Series as far as detail, but in this case, I gotta say the Black Series version is better. They look very much the same, but the Black Series has that better articulated backpack and the additional paint apps. All right, so now that we've done all the comparisons, the only thing left to do is to get Professor Huyang on the spinny. Alright, so overall, the Professor Huyang for the Vintage Collection is a very good figure. It has an awesome card back. The scale of the figure is on point. The articulation of the figure is excellent, with the exception of the backpack arms. And the mold itself is very good. There's a lot of good detailing in the mold. However, there is some lacking in the paint apps. For example, with the wiring. And then the biggest issue with the paint is it's got the wrong color for the body. It really should be a more silvery champagne color and not so much this kind of beige tan color. And so all in all, it's a very good figure. However, that inaccuracy with the body color paired with the lack of articulated backpack arms keeps this figure from being a great figure. All right, now switching gears to my recent droids pickups. Now this is not a pickup, what you're looking at here. This is my Dr. Aphra comic set. This was an SDCC exclusive pack. I love this. It's one of my favorite pieces of my collection because I am infatuated with Dr. Aphra and her murder droids. I do like those comics, even though I'm not a huge comic person. And so I've been wanting to collect those droids loose for a while. And maybe 7 or 8 months ago, I managed to pick up a loose triplezero figure on the cheap from Tongori.com. However, when he showed up, he was missing his faceplate. And unfortunately, Tongori was completely out of stock by that point, so they didn't have another faceplate to send me. So I simply grabbed one off of C-3PO, which was the exact same mold, threw it on there, called it a day. Thought it looked even creepier to have 3PO's face on triplezero. But I did have the intention of eventually painting the face to match the rest of the body, and I finally got around to doing that the other day. And so here is the result, and I gotta say I did a pretty good job considering I never paint or customize anything. And while I was at it, I went ahead and painted his eyes red, which I thought looked pretty good. There's what he looks like without his face on. But yeah, I really like the red eyes. I think that was something TVC kind of missed out on their version. But I do have the Black Series version as well, and you can see on that version they did bother to paint the eyes red. And they also went ahead and gave him all new molded hands with his evil murder droid blades. And so the Black Series version is way better, unfortunately, than the TVC one. But still happy to have a 3 3/4 scale version of this droid. Alright, but that is not the pickup. The pickup is I finally got a 3 3/4 scale BT-1 loose. This guy has been very hard to find loose. Most people do not open that pack. And I got him on an auction on eBay, and I thought I got a pretty decent deal. And he is awesome. I mean, look at this guy. Look at his guns. Now, his guns, they painted him this bronzy color, which I actually really like. But as far as I recall in the comics, his guns are just the same gunmetal gray color that his body is. But anyways, you got the plates from the side of his head. He can pop off like that. You can take the guns off and put the plates back on to have him in regular non-killing mode. And so that's a nice little feature there. You pop this plate back on. And so that's a really nice feature to be able to remove the guns, replace the panels, basically go from murder droid mode to regular droid mode. And he looks good. Unfortunately, because they used that C-3PO mold for triplezero, it's just way undersized when they're standing next to each other. So that's really unfortunate. Hasbro has got to give us an all-new C-3PO mold that's to proper scale. And then maybe we can customize our own new versions of triplezero. Or maybe, just maybe, Hasbro would do the awesome thing and give us an all-new triplezero on a card, and then go ahead and reissue BT1 on a card back as well. That would be awesome, but I don't think it'll happen. And since I showed you the Black Series version of triplezero, let's go ahead and bring in the Black Series version of BT1. Not as much difference between the two here, although the Black Series version does have the more accurate gray colored guns, even though I really liked the bronze touch on the other one. And the Black Series version has a few more little detailed paint apps, but overall, they look about the same. Both pretty awesome figures. So very happy to finally complete my Murder Droid duo, at least loose, so I can put them in different scenarios. And this BT1 figure is one of my very favorite 3.75 astromech figures to ever get. And finally for today, I got a second awesome droid. This is R2S8. Who is from the Solo Droid Factory pack that came out a few years ago. I missed out on this pack when it came out. I never even saw it when it was at retail. And ever since I did see it, I really wanted this particular droid from that pack. But I didn't want to pay the expensive price for that whole Droid Factory set. I just wanted this guy. And he's very hard to find loose by himself. So I finally found him. I got him on an auction, actually from the same seller that I got the BT1 off of. And so I couldn't be more happy to finally have him. I mean, look at the weathering on this guy, the color combinations, and that Arabesh writing on his dome is so cool. Let me know if there's any other droids that have Arabesh on them, but I don't know of one. If there is another one out there, I need to have it because that is such a cool touch to put the Arabesh on there that really sells this figure for me. So anyways, this is my other favorite astromech droid as far as modern 3 3/4 scale goes. Very happy to have this. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of Brett on Fett. Let me know in the comments if you've gotten the new Professor Huyang for TVC and what you think about him. Thanks so much for checking out this video. Thank you to all my subscribers. Don't forget you can also follow me on Instagram and on X. Take care, and we'll see you next time.